The United States started its naval blockade yesterday at 10 a.m. Eastern. We're around 17 hours in, and basically a lot of the traffic, the little trickle we've seen since the start of the war, has come to a screeching halt, apart from one incident. And this is really interesting, because this is a Chinese-owned vessel. It's now said to have tested the U.S. naval blockade because it has passed through the Strait of Hormuz. Let me take you through this. This is the Rich Starry. This is a tanker said to be carrying methanol. It was moving from Sharjah here in the UAE. Remember, a lot of these vessels turn off their transponders, so you don't really know the origin port. It moved toward some islands, then started aborting the mission, moved back, and then started to take that route once again, passing through the strait in the early hours of this morning. Now, this is a tanker that has been sanctioned since March 2023 by the U.S. Treasury Department because it has links to Iran. From what we understand from experts, this tanker was able to move through completely unfazed by the U.S. naval blockade. So we don't know exactly what transpired or how the United States is enforcing this blockade. But this is really interesting. A tanker with links to Iran, sanctioned by the United States, being able to move through the Strait of Hormuz at this time. A lot of shippers are very reticent to even make the voyage. Number one, they're worried about having to coordinate directly with the Iranians. And number two, what will they face when they hit the U.S. naval blockade? A lot of shippers believe this is a double dilemma, negotiating with both sides. From what we know right now, the United States is doing this naval blockade to perhaps stop negotiations, to force Iran to the negotiating table. Remember, a lot of the revenues Iran has been getting at the start of this war had to do with the toll they were charging shippers. And importantly, the Iranian oil that was being sold. If you look at some of the tanker traffic since the start of the war, it has been dominated by Iranian-linked vessels and vessels friendly to Iran. President Trump has been very clear about this. Any vessels or shippers that have paid that toll fee could face indictment. And we have an interesting bar chart here showing just how much traffic has plummeted since the start of the war. You've seen a trickle throughout the over 40 days of this conflict. In total, 453 vessels have transited the strait since February 28th. And importantly, just to give you perspective, normally 130 vessels pass through the strait on a daily basis. Richard Meade is the editor-in-chief of Lloyd's List Intelligence, and he joins us live from London. Richard, good to see you. You and I have been talking consistently since the start of the war, and there have been really interesting developments specifically over the past few hours. After the U.S. naval blockade came into effect, we saw one Chinese-linked tanker, sanctioned by the United States since 2023, transiting through the strait after initially backing out and then moving through once again. What do we know about the Rich Starry and whether it was challenged by the U.S. Navy? Well, at the moment we know very little. It's still moving, which suggests it hasn't been challenged by the U.S. To be clear, we're not entirely sure this was laden with Iranian crude. It's been used as floating storage for a while. It entered back into the Gulf about 10 to 12 days ago from memory. Then it was heading out of the Gulf this weekend and did a bit of a U-turn at the point that Donald Trump announced the blockade. It then made a break for it last night and is now exited. This is, as you say, a sanctioned, falsely flagged ship. It's nominally fraudulently flagged to Malawi, but we know that's a fraud. This probably would be a target, but it seems to have gotten out. We've also got a number of other Shadow Fleet tankers, one of which is sanctioned, heading in. So it's going to be interesting to see how the U.S. responds to this. But right now, the vast majority of shipping is not moving on either side. Give me a sense of what shippers are telling you. There's a lot of confusion about who to negotiate with on the Iranian side. It's been very clear, coordinate directly with Iranian forces. Now you've got the U.S. naval blockade. Is there any appetite to move through the straits, even if vessels are not going to Iranian ports or territorial waters? Right now, no. And I keep telling you, uncertainty is reigning across the shipping industry. That goes in peaks and troughs. If you'd asked me just before the weekend, I would have told you there were at least half a dozen ship owners preparing their ships to move out. And we did see probably the busiest period of activity over the weekend. Around 30 ships transited the strait. Then it came down. As far as I can tell from most mainstream ship owners with their tankers still inside the Gulf, there is absolutely no appetite to move right now until they get some clarity. For those looking to get in, they're again waiting to see what happens over the next few hours. You got a double blockade essentially. You got the U.S. blockading Iranian-linked tankers. And then you got the existing restrictions and threats. If you engage with the Iranians, the US will get you, and vice versa. The shipping industry is stuck in the middle right now. I was also looking at marine traffic data. In total, since the war began, only 450 vessels have been able to transit through the Strait of Hormuz, keeping in mind it's usually 130 vessels per day. The big question now becomes, how many of these vessels paid a toll to Iran, given that President Trump has said any vessel that is paid will be indicted? What data do we have on who actually paid Iran directly? Very little direct evidence, and that's deliberately so. I think everybody was very nervous about the tolls. Essentially, the money being paid was going directly to the IRGC, which is designated as a terrorist organization by the US and the EU. No Western shipowner is going to want a paper record of that. We know settlement was being done in Iran or by crypto, so I think there are probably a few nervous shipowners that we know have paid. But I would stress that the vast majority probably haven't paid. I think you're looking at a three-tier system. First, the Iranian ships themselves. Obviously, they're not charging their own ships. Second, the ones that got through with diplomatic agreements. The Indian government has been absolutely clear that they definitely did not pay for any of their tankers to get out, and there are similar agreements with other countries. Third, a small amount that we know settled at least a fee. In some cases, that was a large fee, around $2 million for a couple of tankers. In some cases, this was passed off as an administration cost, more in the tune of around $150,000 to $200,000. So I think there are going to be a few nervous questions as to how some of these ships got out. But that's for tomorrow. Right now, it's a question of what happens immediately and how we get the vessels moving. President Trump wants to see the strait opening up. Do you think putting in a US blockade is going to have that effect? It's a little bit early to tell. Right now, nothing is moving, so to that extent, it is having an impact. But we know there are a couple of ships heading in westbound. We don't know if they're going to try to get into Iranian ports. We've just seen one heading eastbound using what we call a zombie number. These are tankers using identification of ships that were scrapped years ago, trying to falsely give themselves an identity. It will be interesting to see whether the US Navy intercepts any of these. I think we're really now just waiting to see what the actual action is and what the enforcement strategies on the US side will be. Richard Meade, really great to have you with us. Always a pleasure to speak with you. You give us so much clarity on what's happening on the seas. Much appreciated.